The closure of the port of Hodeidah is a crime against the Yemeni people and against humanity all over the world.
Cry for help from people facing starvation. They're already caught between the hammer and the anvil. Airstrikes by Saudi jets targeting Houthi rebels have flattened much of Hodeidah and killed hundreds of people. The Saudis and their allies have now besieged the port city. They say it's to prevent Iran from supplying weapons to the Houthis. The UN says the siege is also preventing food from reaching millions and will result in a humanitarian catastrophe if not lifted.
We continue to advocate to the Saudi-led coalition that the attack on the port of Hodeidah and the city itself is not necessary. We need this as a lifeline for our work as humanitarians.
But the UN says the Houthis are also responsible for the deteriorating conditions. They've been accused of confiscating aid shipments for their own militias or to be sold on the black market. All that as one of the world's most underreported conflicts continues unabated. Yemen's civil war has claimed over 10,000 lives since it began in 2015. Shia Houthi rebels, backed by Iran and allied to the former President Ali Akbar Saleh, are fighting a Saudi-led coalition that supports the current president, Abdul Rabb Mansour Hadi. They control the west and south, while the Houthis hold sway over the east and north. It's part of Iran and Saudi Arabia's struggle for supremacy in the Middle East that's also prolonged conflicts in Syria and Iraq. Iran currently holds the upper hand, but the new administration in Washington says it wants to change that.
The Trump administration has no intention of passing the buck to a future administration on Iran. The evidence is clear. Iran's provocative actions threaten the United States, the region, and the world.
That seems to have emboldened the Saudi-led coalition to press ahead towards Hodeidah. That's where the Houthis are dug in and waiting. Aid agencies say the fighting will shut down the port for weeks, leaving millions to starve. And these children could be among them. Shoaib Hassan, the Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from New York is Yemen's ambassador to the UN, His Excellency Khalid Hussein Al-Yemeni. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. This war continues to rage on. Who is to blame? Is it the Houthis?
Of course. This is a country that has achieved a lot of successes after the passing of former president, after the Yemeni people managed through a revolution to topple the former President Saleh from power through the GCC initiative, if you might remember. And we achieved so far a lot of positive results in the foundation of the modern state, the federal state that we envisage through the outcome of the national dialogue, through the preparation of the new constitution. We were almost ready to go for general elections. Then the Houthis, in alliance with Saleh and instigated by Iran, they took over the country by force, the style of Hezbollah, or the style of the attempt of the Hizmet movement of Gulen in Turkey.
Now, there was just a recent report from Human Rights Watch saying that the Houthis have been using landmines and killing civilians in the country, and this is well documented, so it's clear that civilians are dying at the hands of the Houthis. Now, the same human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, and others, show that the Saudi-led coalition is killing civilians as well, and the vast majority of the 10,000 or so people who have been killed in this war have been killed by the Saudi-led coalition. So when I ask about blame, isn't the government and the Saudi-led coalition also to blame for this war continuing to rage on?
It's it's quite difficult to assist this way. The situation in Yemen has been provoked through the coup taken taking the country by force, kidnapping the country by force by the Houthis, Saleh and they are proxies of Iran in Yemen. As you know, we know that war is an awful issue. Nobody consider war is a piece is a message of peace. War is war, but the war was a necessity because this is the only way to recover peace and tranquility and to recover the establishment. Because this is something that we cannot accept in Yemen, that Hezbollah-style militia can take over Yemen and dictate the future of this nation. We know that there is also sometimes collateral damage through the air operations. We know that we commit mistakes sometimes here and there, but let me tell you that the huge amount of attacks and casualties and the landmines infested the country everywhere.
Yeah, now I agree with you, and I understand full well that the Houthis are responsible for many civilian deaths, but those same human rights organizations, as I say that the Saudi-led coalition is responsible for the vast majority of those 10,000, more than 10,000 deaths. There are 3 million people displaced. Let me ask you about strategy. Clearly, it's not working. So the Saudi-led coalition is backing your government of President Hadi, trying to defeat the Houthis, but it's not working. 2/3 of the population is reliant on food aid. Thousands have died. Isn't there a better way to do this? Will you talk to the Houthis?
Yep, we are talking to the Houthis, and we are willing to talk. And we went to Kuwait, especially to that. We spent 3 months in Kuwait talking to the Houthis. And at the end, when we had an agreement prepared to sign, they refused to sign the agreement. Putting a lot of emphasis on the famine is a political issue, because they use this concept
but sir, I mean, people are starving. 2/3, as I said, 2/3 of the population are reliant on food aid. It might not just be political. It might be that people are worried that Yemenis are starving to death. No more, no less.
No. We are talking about 80% of the country liberated, which means that there is 80% of the country with lesser humanitarian pressure. We know that the country is in humanitarian need. We know that we need to move to scale up our humanitarian operations, and this is what we are doing. But let me tell you that we are working with the UN, working with the coalition, so that our people have better humanitarian assistance in this situation. But we will defeat the Houthis. We will not let them kidnap our country, kidnap our people, and use the grievances of our people to empower themselves.
Thank you, Ambassador Khalid Hussein Al-Yemeni. Now, to get the other side of the story, we're joined by Hussein Al-Bukhaiti from Sana'a. He's a Yemeni journalist who's been following the war closely. Sir, thanks so much for joining us. You heard that interview with the ambassador. He blames the Houthis first and foremost, fundamentally. Who do you blame?
Actually, I blame the intervention of the Saudi-led coalition because the Houthi, either you agree with them or you don't, they are Yemenis. And for Mr. Yemeni to say that they have kidnapped the country, the one who have kidnapped the country and has sent the country into chaos is the Saudi-led coalition. Because when Houthi seized the government in 21st of September 2014, this was 6 months before the war. There was no starvation. There wasn't any of the crisis we have in now.
Sure. Somebody who's also a Yemeni is President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi. He's a Yemeni. He was the president of a sovereign state, and he was kicked out. He was kicked out by the Houthis in an intervention. Doesn't he have a right to his country? Wasn't he a legitimate ruler of his country?
The President Hadi, the former president, as I call him, he have resigned. And then after 2 months, and when he has gone into Aden, he has withdrawn his resignation, and it's like he thinks it's like a game. But even though this intervention in Yemen is an illegal intervention, and the UN Security Council resolution 2216, it has come after the Saudi intervention, because always the Hadi government always talk about this resolution, and it hasn't mentioned or has actually supported the war on Yemen. It has only mainly on the blockade the Saudi to ban weapons to come into Yemen, but the Saudi has used this blockade to stop food and medicine coming into Yemen. And Mr. Yemeni, when he talk about landmines, of course it is as Amnesty International, of course it is a crime to put landmine in cities and villages, but in many other areas like in the coastal line of Yemen or near Bab al-Mandab, those are battleground. So when you have an international intervention, Saudi-backed led coalition intervention in Yemen, of course the Houthi and the Yemeni army supporting the Houthi will try to use every mean to stop this attack,
you think that's
and to stop the intervention in the country.
So you think that's okay to use landmines?
It in cities. I mean, every country. I mean, that's why they have made those landmines.
I have the Human Rights Watch report in front of me, right? And they go on, they say the Houthi Saleh forces' use of banned anti-personnel landmines in Yemen has caused numerous civilian casualties and hindered the safe return of civilians displaced by fighting. They go on and they list all the governorates, they list 6 of them, and they say these mines have killed and maimed hundreds of civilians and disrupted civilian life in affected areas. So I'll grant it to you that the Saudi-led coalition has caused civilian casualties. Many people have died. Hundreds of civilians, if not thousands of civilians, have been killed by the Saudi-led coalition, but the Houthis are also killing civilians. Will you accept that?
I mean, of course, me personally, I'm not denying that all party of this war has committed crimes. And before you read to me the Human Rights Watch report, I said that it's illegal to use anti-personnel landmine.
One of the first things that they seem to want to do is to take Hudaydah. They're very keen to take Hudaydah. Is that going to be a bloodbath?
I mean, of course it will be, because Hudaydah is one of the largest port city in Yemen and is the only lifeline for over 70% of Yemeni population. They complain and they said that the Houthi are using it to smuggle weapons, and I don't know what kind of blockade they have on Yemen. Have this blockade for 2 years.
They say the weapons are coming through. They say
coming into Yemen.
Sure, they say the weapons are coming from Iran to the Houthis in Yemen. So just like you say, the Saudi-led coalition is an international coalition of non-Yemenis, they're saying the Houthis are getting all their weapons from Iran, and that's why they want to stop them.
How come through 2 years of blockade, of tight blockade, they haven't got any proof of Iranian weapons coming into Yemen?
Okay.
So this is just, I mean, an excuse to extend the pressure on Yemeni people.
Okay, fair point. Hussein, it's good to get your perspective. Thanks so much, Hussein Al-Bukhaiti, joining us there from Sana'a.